Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Sarpy County and City's Wastewater Agency. It's Wednesday, April 24th, 4:01 p.m. Copy of the Nebraska Open Meeting Act rules are on the north wall of the agency boardroom. In attendance today, we have the mayors of our 5 cities in Springfield. In Sarpy County, we have the Springfield mayor, Bob Roseland, the Gretna mayor, Mike Evans, the La Vista mayor, Douglas Kindig, the Bellevue mayor, Rusty Hike, and the Papillion mayor, David Black. I'm Don Kelly. I represent Sarpy County. Our agency administrator is Dan Hoynes. He's over here. And our project engineer is Jeff Thompson. He's center right. Center left is our legal counsel, Adam Charleston. And our financial advisor, CFO, Tony Gay. And Lisa Hare is going to be recording the events today as our secretary. If you will, please silence your phone. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any comments from the board today? Okay, and then we'll get right into our staff report, starting with our administrator, Dan Hoynes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member mayors. I'll be brief, or I've been told to be brief here today. There's couple of items I'll talk about.
Time's up. Oh, sorry.
So is that a vote yes on the budget?
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
Press on.
First thing I'd like to just note, I did give you, I think, a pretty extensive written report, so I won't go over that. And we're going to talk about 2 of those issues, the rate study and the upcoming budget, more in detail on the formal agenda. But I did want to point out appreciation to Tony Gay and Lisa and Jeff. We're still perfecting, but I think you hopefully saw substantial improvement in the detail of the claims report this month. So again, we're still tweaking some of it, but I think it's much easier to see where we are spending the money at, and you can see that. So a couple of other things, continue to work with Paula and on the other administrators on the Gretna boundary adjustment request. We're on schedule to get that up for recommendation to you folks next month. And so I'll just yield the rest of my time or wait until the formal agenda items come up.
Okay, great, thanks. One alibi before Jeff. Come on up, Jeff. Dan gave a tour of a windshield tours, I guess that's what I call it, to a couple folks from Sarpy County, the new administrator, and I think the assistant administrator? Who was
No, it was County Administrator and Commissioner Mixon.
That's right. So anyways, I think they found it pretty instructive, so we'll offer that up for anyone, if you guys want to go out and put eyes on the target. It's picture's worth 1,000 words. Jeff.
Yeah, but block out a couple hours. I mean, even though we don't spend a lot of time, it is a little bit of a drive across the county when you get right down to it. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Kelly. Agency member mayors, Jeff Thompson, project engineer for the agency. I'll make my construction update brief. There has been a lot of activity over the last month. Right now, the railroad crossing on section 4 is 100% complete. They've made the connection. They've got everything backfilled. The last component of that construction is for them to grout the annulus space between the carrier pipe and the steel casing pipe. And then the crossing down at the creek, they have, as you can see in the picture here, this is actually the north side of the creek. They have the thrust block or head wall and valves put in. They've got everything charged as far as the water needed to hydrostatic test that piping, pressure test that piping to make sure that there's no leaks up to that point anyway. And then in the background, you can see the connection to the Omaha structure there where they've preempted everything to actually open the lid on that outfall sewer box and make that connection final here in the next couple weeks. I expect that they're going to start pouring the base for that flow meter that Omaha will utilize for billing purposes the first part of next week. And we should be wrapped up here at this location, I would think, by the end of next month. So all that being said, we should be able to accept flow in any level of capacity from about 63rd Street down to this location. So whether it be through the county, the city of Bellevue, the city of Papillion. So good news there on the segment 4 component. That's, again, a picture looking north, and then this is on the south side of the creek. You can see the similar head wall, and then the air release valves that they, or manhole valves, boxes that they put in there. Jumping over to segment 1, Van Kirk has completed all of the construction and installation of pipe from 132nd Street all the way to the lift station at Mitchell Road. Right now, you're looking at the section from 132nd Street looking east towards 120th Street. This one, you're at 120th Street looking straight north up towards Mitchell. So all those houses on top of the hill here is actually Mitchell Road. This is actually just east of the intersection of 120th and Mitchell Road at a couple of the air release valves and pegging station locations, but this is looking straight east down Mitchell Road towards 108th Street. And then this is about 111th and Mitchell Road, looking kind of northeast from there. So they've got the pipe filled on segment 1 from about 132nd Street to roughly the lift station at Mitchell Road, and going to be pressure testing that here over the next month as well. So last stretch they got to put in, they're already under the creek at Springfield. They've got to put the pipe in across Zimmerman's property at 132nd to Springfield Creek, and then the piping through the lift station site at Springfield around the equalization basin, and that leg of that work should be done as well. So looking at segment 2, this is about 87th and Platteview Road, looking kind of northeast from here. It's Terry and Butch Weiss's property. The Sarpy County Public Works yard, is right here in the background. You can see them spreading topsoil, so we've returned most of this ground to the farmers to start their agricultural practices. And things are progressing well on that side of the work as well. Segment 2 is pretty much entirely complete from 63rd Street up to Hidden Valley Road. We're going to start meeting with Papillion next week to look at charging that system using their raw water supply line as opposed to their treated water supply line to try to save some time and expense for both the city of Papillion and the agency. So grateful for that consideration and partnership there with the city of Papillion. So
you can use the treated water if you pay the bill.
Well, that's just it. It just seems like a waste since it's going right to waste. Once we get it charged for your staff, and from a chemical process, electrical process, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to treat it and then put it in a pipe you're going to dump into the sewer anyway. So essentially is in the sewer anyway. So trying to save some money there and just pump it right out of the ground from their well field. They got a hydrant right in front of the water treatment plant facility. We're going to try to use and charge that line from that perspective. So try to save some dollars there. This is the Springfield lift station site location. This is the secant pile wall system that they're installing currently. They've got 42 of the 51 secant piles in. They're expecting to wrap up the installation of those secants here the first week of May, demobilize in Hawkins, then we'll start the excavation for the wet well around or within the confines of those secant pile wall systems. And then this is just another aerial photo of just a plan view photo of the location. This is where the wet wells and the secant pile system's being worked on right now currently. Mitchell Road lift station, progressing very well. They poured the walls on both this picture is a little bit dated, but they have poured the walls on both the metering manholes and valve manholes, as well as the distribution manhole. They've backfilled the wet well and poured the lid on the wet well. So things are progressing really well here. I expect within the next probably 60 to 90 days, they'll be wrapping up pretty close to being done with everything at this location, with the exception of the generators. Those were long lead time items that we did try to pre-order with that $10 million of DNR money that we received and try to get ahead of that stuff. Expected delivery on those is sometime September, October. So just one photo looking to the north and west, and here's another one looking northeast of that same site location. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. We're crushing it.
No questions?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 2 items on the consent agenda. Would anyone like to see one of those items moved to the regular agenda? I'll make the motion. Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve the consent.
So moved. Second.
Motion by LaVista, second by Papillion. Any discussion? Please vote.
Lisa, mine's not working. I'll vote yes.
Okay. Yeas 6, nays none, motion carried.
Okay, in the regular agenda, the first item is number 5, which is Resolution 12, adopting the revised sewer user rate and connection fee schedule for the United Southern Sarpy Wastewater System. Dan Hoynes, Agency Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, member mayors. I'm going to make a couple of preliminary comments, and I would ask that Wes, or Mark and/or Wes, if both are coming, and make their way up to the podium. They'll be doing the formal part of the presentation on the rates. My initial comments on this, you have a 20-page report from Corello plus attachments. I provided a 3-page or 2.5-page summary of the work that's been done the last year, and a lot of work in the last 90 days, but all of that really sums up into one paragraph in my report. Both connection fees and user rates are established to avoid a call on the Sarpy County credit backstop, which would require use of property taxes. That sentence, I think, encompasses why we're here today and the recommendation that we're making. And it's went through several iterations over the last year, but I think there is, at least at the administrative level, a level of consensus to present. Earlier today, I think Mayor Hike, Mayor Black were there. We had, I think, a fairly candid discussion on rates. Business person asked about the 25% increase and what we could expect in future years, and said, well, if I were standing before you in 2018, I would have told you 5% a year would cover it. That didn't end up being the case, primarily driven by the significant $60 million increase in construction costs. So Mark from Corello has been, I think that he and Wes have worked with us. And so he's going to give you a summary and be able to answer any questions, and then we would respectfully request approval of the resolution with the established rate.
Thanks, Dan. Good afternoon, Chairman, Mayors. I appreciate the time. My name is Mark Panny. I'm with Corello Engineers. I also have Weston Engel, who's on our team. We've been working with the agency for about a year on this study, I think, which goes to speak to just how much input we've been working to gather from various stakeholders. Dan covered a broad outline, and the report that he mentioned has the full detail of our analysis. So I encourage you to look through that for specific steps that we took. But our goal with this presentation is to provide a little bit of the background on the study, where we started, what we did, some of the goals that we had in that analysis, and then talk about the rate proposal that Dan has mentioned, and that's before you today. On the agenda for that presentation is, like I said, background and goals. Then we want to talk about what approach we took for the rate feasibility analysis, then move into our results and financial projections for the next roughly decade, and then finally talk about next steps. So this is a multi-year rate proposal, but we are keeping an eye on the long-term feasibility of the rates, sustainability of the revenue program for the agency. Start with background. So as I mentioned, we've been working with the agency for about a year. We kicked off a little over a year ago, and we met at that time with staff and stakeholders from the member agencies to gather feedback and to kind of establish a vision for the project. Over the course of the next several months into that summer, we developed our rate model, tried to gather as much data as we could, but as you know, there's a lot of uncertainty and moving inputs with this project over the years. And so we worked closely with staff. We had a workshop in July with agency administrators and representatives to try to put some firmer numbers in place in our model, get some better input and feedback once we'd had a chance to gather everything. That led into a subsequent workshop in November where we had our first rate model scenario workshop, where we presented our model at that point with the inputs that we had, the data we had, tried to gauge the uncertainty that still was in the data and get some feedback from the stakeholders to better form where we went from there. Starting in 2024, we formed with staff a more formal technical advisory meeting approach and had very regular check-ins with the admins from the respective agencies. And at that point, over those first few months of 2024, we really finalized the inputs with, of course, input from staff, but also from the various other parties that had assisted as part of the project development, and of course with the member agencies. At that point, in approximately February, was the development of the rate proposal that's before you today. And over the last month, we put together the attached report supporting that proposal and our rate feasibility results. So I'm just going to pause there just in case there's any background. We have the presentation's fairly brief, but just before we get into some of the results, I just want to make sure, please interrupt me at any time, but I want to just make a moment to answer any questions while we're still getting started, if there are any. Okay. So I want to just spend a moment talking about, what kind of goals did we establish as part of our modeling approach. First goal, we wanted to provide the agency with best practices for financial performance. And the primary target there was 120 days of operating budget held in reserves, simply for the purpose of maintaining cash flow. Just as revenues and expenses might not line up, we want to make sure that the agency has enough cash on hand to fund all of its expenses. So that was goal number one. We provide that recommendation. Goal number two, really a twofold goal, to test the feasibility of the rates to achieve financial feasibility over both short and long term. Over the short term, the primary goal there is maintaining that cash flow, maintaining that 120 days. Over the long term, that's more focused on, as the agency becomes operational, maintaining funding for both capital and operations, and achieving the debt coverage obligations that I'll talk about in a couple slides. And the last goal is to develop a rate model that we could give to staff that can adapt to the operational uncertainties of this new agency. So I've used that term uncertainty a few times. Given that this is a new agency, there is, as you know, uncertainty about how much flow exactly will come into the system, still developing the costs. So we worked very closely with staff to build the model that allows them to adapt it for the budget, adapt it for changing flow, all of those different inputs. So that was our third goal as part of the study. Okay, and with that, I'm going to move into results and projections. So the rate proposal before you this afternoon, I'll start with sewer rates. That is 5% annually for the next 4 years in this ordinance. That is actually, the previous rate ordinance had 2025 rates in it, also at 5%. The one change here is that we have consolidated the 3 rate classes into one, which better supports the operations and billing for the agency. And that would continue, as I said, at 5% annually for the next 4 years. The other piece of the revenue structure is the connection fees, which go to support the development of the new infrastructure, repaying the debt service. Given the drivers in the capital costs, that is proposed to increase at 25% for 2025, and therefore thereafter increasing at 5% annually. Okay, so with that rate proposal, we put that in our rate model to first look at, I mentioned reserves. So with that rate proposal, we are projecting that reserves remain above the 120-day target. The blue line is the end-of-year reserves, or the cash on hand, and the yellow bars is that 120 days of operating costs. And as you can see, it approaches that 120-day target, but remains above that. And the other piece that we looked at is the debt coverage. So just a brief background on debt coverage. It is essentially when you, with each debt issuance, there's typically a covenant in that issuance that the agency has to generate revenue, not just to cover the debt service, but an additional coverage above that. In the case of the agency, it's 10% above that debt service. over the next 10 years. It does tick up after that, but it's 10% for the next 10 years. So essentially, there needs to be 110% of the debt service collected. And as you can see, it does approach that 110 threshold, but it does not dip below that. And so with this proposed rate and fee update, we are projecting that debt coverage is met in each of the next 10 years. Okay. Just to wrap up, I want to just talk briefly about next steps. Today, we are hoping for your feedback, final feedback, and consideration of the rate proposal and ordinance. The rates and fees would take effect on July 1st of this year. And then in December, that is when initial flows are anticipated into the system. And so going into 2025, we are planning to work with the agency to take a look at how flows change, how that actually materializes, how the costs materialize, and make updates to the rate model as needed based on the actuals. And once we can kind of get a better grasp around the data that we have. So with that, my email's on the slide if you have follow-up questions later, but I'm happy to take any questions that you do have today. Thanks.
Questions? No. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion to approve the new rates and connection fees?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, I'll second it. So we have a motion by LaVista, a second by Sarpy. Any further comments or discussion? Please vote.
Yea, 6, nays none, motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Agenda item 6 is the presentation of the 24-25 fiscal year budget. Dan Hoynes.
Somebody gonna help me here? While they're making its way around here, the presentation, folks, So while it's doing that, first, it doesn't escape us the difficulty that you have in setting rates or taxes or fees or anything. So genuinely appreciate that and hope that we're at some level where we're going to be consistent into the future, more predictability. We have hard construction costs, zoned in on our operational costs. But the issue before us here in the next few minutes, I'd like to this is not up for a vote today, just for the record. It's to present to you the preliminary draft budget discussion. I did have a meeting with the chair and the vice chair first, then socialized it with all the administrators, and so you're getting eyes on it through this process, but the final vote is scheduled for next month, so that if you have any input, questions, comments, that gives you plenty of time to do that. One of the first things I think it's always important to understand where you've been if you want to know where you're going. Let me advance this here. There we go. Come back and did a little history, Mr. Chairman, member mayors, that over the last 6 years, and this really ends, my first few slides address July 1, 2017 to June 30, 2023. And I pulled this information off the audit reports, the approved audit reports. The key numbers there that we've sourced $141.3 million worth of revenue. You see the two large ones, or the large one with the state grant, the SARPI ARPA, Congressman Bacon, 4.5, of which $1 million was just there. And I put WIPIA pending. But if you look at the total agency expenditures during our operation through June 30th, we spent $87 million as of last June 30th on this project. Advancing to the next piece of information, this just comments that later this year, we're not only going to celebrate pipe in the ground, but we're going to be commissioning Phase 1A of this system into operation. I want to take a moment and talk about the WIFIA loan. You're going to vote here in a few minutes. And so the WIFIA loan is up, it's for $45 million. Key point here, the proposed budget that you'll be considering next month indicates we'll be able to deliver Phase 1A of the project without a need to draw on the full $45 million. I'm very reluctant to commit to a number here because we've had so many unknowns, and Don reminds me of that every day. But there's going to be significant funding. We're not going to have to exercise that, and I'll point that out as we go through here. But there are things not in this budget that are required of the WIFI, and I list the four big ones: the decommissioning of the Springfield plant, construction, office location. I've shared with most of you, I don't think that's probably going to be a need into the future. We have some flow meters and 2 pending condemnations. Those are not in any of this budget we're talking about, but when we make a decision, then we would use WIFIA to as a funding source for that. There's a key slide. During the budget process next year, we will know the final Phase 1A costs and be able to prioritize what remaining amounts of the WIFIA loan we might need and where we might use those funds. Now, not as simple as I always like to make it. It's a preliminary discussion with WIFIA. Can we just carry these over? And their initial response was no. But I don't always take no for an answer right out of the chute. So I think that we may have to do a new application process, but it doesn't change the fact, whether it's our debt service or the upcoming budget, that we're not going to be using all of that. And that money is going to be available in some manner. So the current budget, talking about now for July 1 of 24 to June 30 of 25. The assumptions, all the proposed income and expense categories are predicated on the agency increasing fees by 25 effective July 1. The summary, if you look at the last 2 years side by side, 23-24, we had 88,270,284 in revenue and expenses of 86,473,828. The proposed budget, the draft budget, shows 66,478,643.06 in revenue and expenses of 24,592,242. That's a pretty significant delta in there. And so again, I'm not going to say the number, but you can do the math. It might be more. And I do know we had some Hawkins stuff come in there, so that number's going down, but it's going to be a significant amount. So the significant changes in this budget, there's really about 3 areas. We're going from $21,623 in operation and maintenance of the system, the physical system, to $1,236,507. Everything, you know, the fuel to run all the generators, the odor control system, those type of things that are actually operational, really significant increase. I referenced it during some of our other discussions is we're giving birth to a full-blown sewer system here in a few months, and we have to be able to operate that. Debt service goes up pretty substantially, even though it's sculpted out through 2031. We've been paying $500,000 next year. Our debt service goes to $1,520,700. So, you know, over $1 million increase in debt service. Personnel benefits, obviously, you know, FY 23-24, $508,716 on July 1 last year. The upcoming year, $729,445. You hired me. We had an agreement with the county for Lisa. We also moved, and that slides into point number 4. In the current budget, we had $150,000 initially. It got amended, and then I think changed again for bookkeeping, CFO system. We took that out of the consulting, but then moved in to the part-time employee, the treasurer's position, and moved $78,000 of that $150,000 from the consulting line item to the personnel and salaries. He had not just me, the agreement for Lisa and Tony are the significant adds since last year. do detail those. But I think it's important that from, again, July 1 last year, we had 781,222 in consulting expenses. Next year, it's 423,000. We had while we picked up quite a bit in personnel, I think you're seeing a shift that many of us predicted, that we're going from heavy reliance, almost exclusive reliance on consultants and the support of Sarpy County to full-time staff people managing a lot of that. So that really concludes what I think I want to talk about today, Mr. Chair, member mayors. Continue to have dialogue with your admins here, take their feedback. But if there's nothing significant or whatever changes that come up, I'll present those changes from this, but then we'll ask for approval of that budget on May 22. Then this is one of the few times that each respective governing body must approve, take a formal action. So you'll have to take it back to your city councils and the county board after we approve it, and they have to ratify it by June 30th. And so I'm already working with your administrators or representatives on timing so that they can help us meet that June 30 time frame, but then we should be in pretty good shape. So I'll pause there and take any questions you may have.
So on the capital expenditure for a future building down at the Springfield site, I just have a request. I can't wrap my arms around spending that kind of money if we have an alternative. Now, I know we got a good setup right now, at least for the near term, as far as our personnel location and our housing, but the equipment and stuff that we're going to obtain, we're going to have to find a place for that. So my request is, see if we can work with the 5 cities to see if they've got any excess capacity where, we can store our equipment as we start to collect more and more. It may not be feasible, but that would certainly save us a lot of money on capital expenditures.
That's a very fair request. We'll certainly look at that, Mr. Chair. And there's also, as part of the decommissioning, Springfield has several buildings down there. They won't be using anymore, and so we don't know if there'll be some potential renovations for that. So, building something new will be our last option.
Yeah.
But I know I shared with you and the vice chair that I don't see the need to build an office space, even well into the future. I think there's some potential for more space out at the NRD. They've been very gracious landlords and hosts. We have some ability to get some significant space there. Certainly that original 2,000 square feet, according to Mr. Winkler, that's done in 5 years. And he's going to work.
He said that before.
Well,
So.
I'll let you and John talk about that. You're both
I don't
elected.
believe him completely, but what you got is doable. I wish Lisa was down with you guys. That would make it better.
I think we're going to get that resolved by the end of the year.
But for right now, it works, and yeah.
She's been very patient. I think we'll get a 3 to 5 year solution even before then, by the end of this year.
Right.
John I think he goes in the back door now when he sees me coming up to talk to him about more space. So,
Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Dan.
thank you.
Okay, item 7 is Resolution 13. This is where we get to approve and authorize the re-execution of the Whitfield loan agreement and other related documents. Dan?
I will yield my time to Mr. Charlson. He's the one that's been managing
Adam?
this thing. So I don't know if he looked at me like funny. So yeah.
This is almost identical to what we did 2 months back. We're just re-executing the loan agreement this board approved in October. The only material difference is the new interest rate that will be lower than what it is right now, 5.1. And we'll know that rate soon as the board approves this tonight during some conference calls with the folks tomorrow, morning and early.
So you're going to be up at 5 a.m. watching CNBC to make sure the rate's going in the right direction?
I'll let Steve handle it.
I mentioned yesterday in our county board meeting, it's just frustrating, because we had this great idea. Because I follow the market and I was looking at, the 10-year was like 4.1. I'm going like, that's a lot of money, 1% over 26 years. And
Hopefully it holds. It's still worth about 6 million
Yeah,
over the course of the loan, so it's gonna be worth doing it.
I had illusions of grandeur, though. I was thinking 18. you know.
I know, I told him that if it went up before you got here tonight, that if it went up one more time before tomorrow, that we're gonna have to peel Kelly off of the ceiling. And so, a lot of pressure on you tomorrow.
Anybody have any questions on this? All right, then take a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Papillion, second by Springfield. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Yay, 6, nays none, motion carries.
Okay, our next meeting is May 22nd, 2024, and the agency has had all agenda items addressed, it's published, and we're going to stand adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you. I was a little